totally done. Not good. So, I guess some countries they call it a S2. But my Audi 90 blew the cover off of that. That's shredded too. Check that out. It's all tore up. Future project. I just love this coupe style. 2-door. Nice wing. This wing was just off the chain. Oh my God, it even blew the Audi emblem off on the ground. What the hell? That is crazy. I'll save this, but damn. What the heck? Have 2 carts loaded up with wood, and these carts are extremely heavy. We got 4x4s, about 12 feet long, 2x10s, about 12 feet long, plywood. A lot of weight here. This is definitely going to load the trailer up, but we got to get these shelves built to store these VR6 engines on there. Pull the truck and trailer up to the loading area. We have plenty of wood to load this up. This was a major workout. We have the trailer loaded up and stacked very neatly. I use some of the 4x4s right across the back. Making some progress building some engine shelving for my 3.6 liter VR6 engines. I have a few 32 valve V8s and some 4-cylinders. So I need more garage space, and I am creating a 3-tier shelf to support some of these engines. First shelf, second shelf, as well as the upper shelf is going to hold and support cylinder heads. Pretty much just now installed my uprights. I'm ready to close off the bottom deck. Turned out pretty good. As you can see, we're leveled in my sight glass. And now I ran my carriage bolts through the front. So now all I have to do is slide this lip over right here and close up this deck, and my first tier will be finished. And then a matter of bolting in another support, a 4x4 by 11 foot in length, and we'll be pretty much getting close for our second tier. I removed the center plank and put some cross supports, as you can see right there, so that way it's really stable in the corners. I did it on both sides. And now that I have the second tier support, I'm going to cut some cross supports going across, so that way once I lay my planks, I'll have structural support in the center, just like down here. You can see them in between here, my cross supports going over here. I'm going to do the same thing over here, mount some braces. That way when you put in the center plank, it has some stability. We're making some progress working on the shelving. I got the first 2 shelves built, nice and sturdy, heavy duty. I'm working on the third. Since I am working by myself, I'm using clamps to hold the beams in position, and then that way I can drill. Usually if you got 2 or 3 people, all you need is another person at the other end. But the clamps are nice and good because that way you can hold them. I had my mark measured out. With this section right here, I'm going 34 inches. So that way I can have a 34-inch clearance. I use 30 inches for the bottom. That gives me enough clearance to fit the VR6 engines without any problems. I went with a little more just in case I have to use an engine hoist to hoist up something on a second tier. And as far as the third, I can just use that for light storage, or if necessary, store some cylinder heads or something up there. Cylinder heads are very heavy, so you want to be careful putting heavy items on the top shelf. But either way, I can still put light, items, parts or stuff like that up there on the top shelf, and put all my bulk items on the lower 2 tiers. I just cut some plywood for the upper shelf, and it's definitely tricky to get this in. So I had to put the back cross member in first. I'm going to squeeze this in, flip it up, put it up close to the ceiling, use a beam clamp to support it up high, and then I can put my other cross member, my front cross member, across the front, and then lower it from the top back down onto the beam itself. I have the engine on the shelf. I actually spun it around so that the damper is facing against the wall. Flywheel is facing the back part. And that way, most of the nose and the weight of the engine is pretty much supported against the wall. I didn't want to tilt it the other way with the damper facing on the outside and risk the engine tilting forward and falling off the shelf. I'm also going to jack the back part up. That's why I have the hoist hooked up to the back part of the engine, raise it up and put a 2x4 up under the backside just to stabilize the engine. As you can see, the engine is slightly tilting backwards. And I don't want to take a chance of it possibly being too far off balance. It would take a lot of weight to shift this back off the shelf since it's pretty much nose heavy. But if I put a support under the back to stabilize and keep that engine more balanced. I'm about to hoist the 4-banger up on the shelf. I'm gonna have to do this one a little bit different. I'm going in on an angle. I'll put the left leg up on this shelf, the right leg on the opposing shelf, and jack this up so that way I can squeeze this up in that corner. Let's see if we can get this thing to squeeze up in there like sardines. We have number 2 squeezed on there. 4-banger squeezed right perfectly in position. Actually have clearance in between both engines, as you can see back there. So we're looking good. That was my objective, to at least possibly get 2 VR6s on the shelf, but I wanted to get this V8 up there because it's wide and it takes up so much space. But I did accomplish the goal of getting 2 engines. So that is 2 extra engines off the floor and on the shelf, giving me more garage space for pulling in Teddy's Audi TT to get that beast wired up and taken care of. This is about the furthest I can slide this big 4.0 T V8 on the shelf. I'm gonna have to muscle it in. The oil pan is so wide, you can see it's coming really close to the leg of the jack, the engine hoist. So we'll muscle it in as close as possible, and then I probably will maybe put another 4x4 cross member across the front support just to keep the engine up and from tilting out of the shelf. Normally it wouldn't because it's so heavy, but either way, just for that extra protection, we'll put a cross member right across the floor level. Well, we have the 4.0 T on the engine shelf, and this thing is a beast. This engine was extremely heavy. Look at the width of this monster. It's just wide, takes up a lot of space. I barely have room to squeeze something in between there. I could probably get just a 4-cylinder block, maybe without the head, but it's cutting it very close. Or it may just be another one that I could squeeze tightly in there. But as you can see, this thing was no joke. Got it in. I put an extra support on the floor and a 2x4, 4x4 as well as a 2x4 up underneath, just to keep the front end steady so that way it won't tip forward. But for the most part, is the balance of this engine, and wants to tilt backwards towards the wall, which is good. She's in position. I removed the large 4x4 supports. I put a little small short 4x4 block right up under the front motor mount. And on the back side of the engine, remove the long beam and just put a little short mount also just to support the oil pan. We have it back. Nice clearance, as you can see from here. We are looking pretty good as far as having clearance, and it's shoved back pretty far. Continue to put engines on the shelf. Let's keep going. Making some progress. It is a workout, but so far I have 8 engines on the shelf and slide number 9. We have 3 VR6s up top, 2 VR6s right here on the bottom, 4.0 T, 4.2 liter V8, turbocharged 4-banger. It came into the Passats. And I'm sliding in this 3.6 liter VR6 with a dual clutch transmission attached to it. On the second shelf, I have another 4-cylinder with a dual clutch transmission. I'll slide right above this one also as well. This engine was far too hard to try to slide in this corner up top. So I'm jacking it up and managed to get a little dolly underneath, and I'll allow it to balance itself back out, and then I can roll it in the corner. Leave it on the dolly. I'm not worried about the dolly. These engines have been sitting on the dollies for years anyway, so it'll just be on the shelf and be easier access. We are doing good. I managed to get 6 engines on the second shelf. That's impressive. I knew I could possibly get 5, but I managed to get 6. The 4-cylinder was taking up quite a bit of space with the transmission attached to it. I was able to take off the motor mounts and rotate the whole engine around due to the fact that it's on that dolly, and allow the transmission to sit in that pocket right there on the back side of the wall. That allowed me to spin it around and get enough room to squeeze this V8 up in the middle between these engines. So we did good. 4-banger V8, 2.5 liter, 5-cylinder, 3.6 VR6, 3.6 VR6, 3.6 VR6. Let's see what we can do on the bottom. It would be nice if I was able to do the same, but that motor is a lot bigger and heavier with that VR6. So I don't think it's going to be too much spinning that around. But either way, I know I can possibly get another 2 engines on that bottom row. It's a tight squeeze getting 5 VR6s on the bottom shelf. So what I decided to do was pull the 3.6 liter with the DQ250 on it, squeeze another VR6 in that corner, and then I can go straight in, just like I did with the 4-cylinder up top, and let the transmission hang off the shelf into that back pocket right there. That way, I'll still have room to get enough engines on the shelf. Also, what I may do is pull this VR6 back off the shelf, take off the exhaust manifold and intake manifold, and that'll give me a little extra clearance to squeeze these engines in here without too much of a problem. Of course, if I took all intakes and exhaust manifolds off, that would allow me to squeeze more room into it, but I kind of rather keep the engines together as a package the way they came, and that way I don't have parts all over the place. So this one, I'm not too concerned about this intake manifold because the back part of it is cracked, so I can just take that off, as well as the exhaust manifolds. Well, it's a wrap for installing the engines on the shelves. I made some major progress. I managed to get 16 engines on these shelves, which is good. By me double stacking them, that gave room instead of having them all scattered over the garage floor like they was originally scattered. I have the 4.2 V8, 4-cylinder, 4.0 T, another TDI block 4-cylinder, VR6, 4-cylinder TDI block, VR6, and these VR6 over here are 3.6 liters. This is a 3.2 VR6 from out of Cayenne. No, this is a 2.8. No, this is a VR6 also, 3.6 liter VR6. Up top, 3.6 VR, 3.6, 3.6. This is a 2.5 liter, 5-cylinder, and 4.2 V8 block. And over in the corner is a turbo 4-cylinder. 16 engines. We managed to squeeze them in. So right now I'm about to finish off the top section. I'm just going to build another shelf for the top, just like here, and that way we can get some storage on top of here. Just fired the GT up, about to pull it back up in the garage. I reorganized a lot of things so that way I can get that TT up in this garage. I'll pull all of this stuff out of the way in a few minutes, and then it should be room enough to back this in here. So we'll see. This will be the first time any car has been in this garage since it's been closed off, because it's been housing for motors. Motors was everywhere. So as you can see in the background, I built store shelves, double stacked the engines, and all the miscellaneous parts, just stuck them on the shelf until I can take the time out to sort things out and organize them like I want. But either way, the main objective was to get this into the garage so that way we can go ahead, focus on working on this TT no matter what the weather is, whether it's raining or whatever. I don't have to worry about being outside. I can work indoors. Don't have to take an hour cleaning up my tools. Leave everything like it is in the garage, pick back up on it the next day. So let's get this bad boy pulled inside the garage and see if we can fit this TT in the second garage. Okay, we have the space cleared out for the TT. Only thing I have on the floor is the pump. Put the front wheels on, cut the rest of the balloon tent from around the car. Hook up the quick jack stand, hydraulic pump, lower this baby down, put the front wheels on, and connect it to tow strap to my truck. Now let's go ahead and pull this up the hill, and step by step, slowly let it drift back so we can get this in the garage. Okay, we're making some progress, trying to make a tight turn. I could have pulled it up a little bit higher, but I'm trying to cut the wheels sharp enough to see if that'll drift it on back. It's a slight hill, so even if I cut the wheels tight, then maybe I can crank it back the other way and swing it on in here. We're almost in there. This thing is so wide, we have clearance on both sides, but it was cutting it a little close getting through that doorway. We probably had like 4 to 5 inches on each side, but she squeezed up in here. let's back it on in and make sure we got enough room to get it all the way in and close the door. Okay, we got this beast in the garage. First car that's been in this thing since it's been closed off. I moved the quick jacks back under the car on each side, and I still have clearance. I pushed this thing tightly back as far as I could. I still have a few inches. I moved it back a little bit further so that way once I raise it up with the quick jacks, it's going to roll, it's going to move the car forward, and that way I still have plenty of door clearance and room behind to get around this and work. So yeah, she's in there. It took quite a bit of moving and stacking engines and all kind of stuff just to get this bad boy in the garage, and then I can slowly sort through stuff, toss out the rest of the stuff in the back corner that I may not keep, harnesses. There's a lot of intake manifolds from off of VR6 engines and things like that, depending on what I want to do with it. But either way, primary goal was to get this thing inside the garage. Made moves. We got both cars back in the garage. GTI's back in there, buried behind these engine hoists, and it's not even really buried. All I got to do is roll the engine hoists out the way, pull it back out, we can start it up. But both cars are now in the garage, and we can start working on these babies. What originally initiated this was my neighbor cut down the trees and didn't have his privacy fence up yet, and complained about me working on his car a lot. So they didn't like the balloon tent. I guess it was blocking their visibility, and they sent me a citation. Well, this car is from Vegas, where my brother lived at. I'm in B-More. So we don't have up-to-date tags because it's been sitting until we get this bad boy on the road up and running, and he can get the Vegas tags back up on here. But either way, that's what initiated all of this moving and whatever I had to do just to get this thing in the garage. But she's there.